Edwon, and I've been really passionate about characters my whole life. And I had a dream when I was a kid. I really, really, really wanted to go to Disneyworld. Yeah. So before I went to Disneyworld, I had seen Indiana Jones, of course, like any kid. And I imagined going to Disneyworld was like literally meeting Harrison Ford and going on an adventure with him. So that's what I was expecting. You can kind of see me right there. I thought I would be there, and I thought he would be there, and it would be the actual real Indiana Jones. But then when I got there, the reality was that Indiana Jones was just some weird guy who kind of looked like Harrison Ford, but not really. And there was a stage production, and it was kind of like a big play. I didn't really like plays. It's a massive disappointment. But I also really like this other character named Chip and Dale, two characters. Can you go to the next slide? So my expectation of Disney World version of Chip and Dale was this on the left. But the reality was actually that I was waiting in line, and some ride, I don't remember which one, it might have been Splash Mountain, and there was this little house next to a tree, and I could hear Chip and Dale fighting with each other. And I was just fascinated. I was like, Dad, they're really in there. Like, they're actually, it's Chip and Dale, oh my gosh. So despite it might seem like this was a total failure of the fantasy versus reality, but I think actually by constraining the problem, it was way more effective to me as a kid than trying to make the real thing, you know, kind of obscuring it and using illusion to disguise a character interaction. Can you go to the next slide? So, have you ever had an imaginary friend? I think it's a lot like this. It's similar to watching a show and seeing a character and then imagining more stories with that character. I think a lot of kids do this, whether they have a strict actual imaginary friend or like a teddy bear that they carry around and talk to. I think this is a really common thing with kids. Can you go to the next slide? Have you ever watched an animated VR film? Has anyone here seen Henry? Okay, so Henry is an amazing film, but to me, it's not really VR. You're just sitting there watching, and you feel like you're there, but no one's acknowledging your presence. They're completely ignoring you for most of the story, and I actually find this very frustrating. The first thing most people do is they try to touch Henry, but they can't. In fact, they don't even have anything in their hands, and there's no sensors that can detect their hands. I think this is something that needs to be fixed, and I really want to challenge the VR community to try to achieve the next step here. So yeah, you're kind of faced with what you imagine VR is, what you imagine a character is, and what the actual reality that you can achieve in VR is. And I think there's a huge difference between, it's not a difference, I think physical presence is something that causes social presence. If there's characters in the scene and you feel physically present, there's no way around the fact that people want that character to acknowledge them. So yeah, you want to touch everything, right? You're in VR, you want to touch. If it's stereoscopic VR, there's no way around that. But if nothing reacts to you, there's no presence to me. So I think if digital characters don't fulfill the expectations that we're creating through the technology, it's a complete failure of what we can really do with VR and interactive characters. I don't claim to have all the answers for this, by the way. I think this is a really tough problem. I just want people to be aware of the fact that it is something that needs to be paid attention to. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Disney history. I worked with Disney a little bit at Imagineering, and ever since I was a kid, I wanted to work with them. And they kind of discovered the principles of the illusion of life. And this is a huge part of animation. These are just 3 of the principles, but there's 12 in total. There are things like anticipation, squash and stretch, follow-through action. These are all the things that bring a character to life on screen, and animators study this their whole life. But I think the real challenge we have now is the interactive illusion of life. And this is a totally different thing. At any time, a user, if you enable them to interact with a character, they can interrupt whatever the animator was hoping to create. That's so difficult to deal with. You have to then animate like 100 different possible scenarios. But I think there's some things you can do to constrain that problem, and I'll talk about that. So another thing that needs to be addressed is that if you have a character and it starts interacting with you, if it's a character that you're expecting to talk, Like, let's say Woody from Toy Story. Woody wants to talk, right? It's Tom Hanks. Everybody knows it's Tom Hanks. You can't get around the Tom Hanks-ness of Woody. But if he's in VR right in front of you and you feel like he's right there, you expect Tom Hanks' voice to start talking to you. And you expect to be able to talk back. Currently, that's not possible with technology. So I think what we need to do is instead design characters around the limitations. So some of the principles of what I think as the interactive illusion of life are touch, eye contact, changes over time, and simple AI. So I think it should be a principle of this interactive illusion of life that you have to be able to touch characters. I also think that characters should make direct eye contact with the user. This is incredibly powerful, even in its most simplest form. And I think characters should live when you're not there. Like, what's up when you turn off the machine? Are they still living in there? What's going on? When you come back to the experience after having been gone for a few days or a few months, it should feel like time has passed and they're still living there in that world. That's part of what creates that illusion. And this one's really tough. I'm currently making my own game that is challenging some of these principles, but the first version of this game had really complicated AI. It went down all these branching paths. We've experimented with neural networks. But the farther I've gone along, the more I realized that the simpler the AI, the more users could understand it. And this is very similar to how animation works. You actually want a very simple, clear animation to create the illusion of life. And it's the same thing with the AI. If users don't understand the logical connect between actions, or they don't have a way to invent it, then you're going to break that illusion. So I think to counter that, though, a little bit of randomness in the behavior is not bad. A slight amount of randomness, like a 20% chance of randomness, users will attribute meaning to that. So even though the AI literally did nothing, users invent a reason. And sometimes that unexpected behavior accounts for the fact that it's not a real AI. So I think to create truly compelling interactive characters for AR and VR, we must work within the constraints and explore the possibilities that are very unique to this medium. This is my game that I'm working on. It's called Waba. This is the self-promotion part. This is Waba. But this is the real version of Waba. It's just a toy. But when you play in the game, you actually just use Oculus touch controllers or Vive or Leap Motion, and you can touch this digital character. And even without any haptic feedback whatsoever, I think there's a pretty good illusion that can be done with touching and having an actual physical reaction visually to it. Oh. This is me, and Edwon Studio is my company, and that's it. Thank you.